The government just dropped a major lawsuit and everyone's celebrating like the war is over. But here's what nobody's telling you. There's a legal loophole so dangerous that the ATF could still come after every single pistol brace owner in America tomorrow morning, and there's currently only one case standing in their way. Let's cut through the noise and get to what actually matters here. The Trump administration's Department of Justice recently made headlines by agreeing to drop their Fifth Circuit appeal in a significant case challenging the pistol brace rule. On the surface, this looks like a massive victory for gun owners across the country. The previous administration's attempt to classify all braced pistols as short-barreled rifles appears to be dead in the water. Case closed, right? Wrong. What's happening behind the scenes right now could determine whether pistol braces remain legal for the next 50 years or become a ticking time bomb waiting to explode in your hands. You see, there's a critical distinction that most people are completely missing in this whole situation. The rule itself might be gone, but the underlying legal interpretation that gave birth to that rule is very much alive. And that interpretation is what makes this entire situation so incredibly precarious for millions of gun owners who thought this fight was finished. Let me take you back to how we got here in the first place. The previous administration decided to create a new regulatory framework that would have forced anyone with a braced pistol to either register their firearm under the National Firearms Act, destroy it, turn it in, or face potential federal felony charges. This wasn't some minor policy adjustment. This was a fundamental reinterpretation of what constitutes a regulated firearm under federal law. Multiple lawsuits were filed across the country challenging this rule. Gun owners, advocacy organizations, and even state governments stepped up to fight back against what they saw as a massive federal overreach. Eventually, a federal judge issued a ruling that struck down the rule completely on a nationwide basis. This was huge. It meant the enforcement actions, the registration deadlines, the looming threat of prosecution, all of it came to a grinding halt. When the new administration took control, they looked at the ongoing appeal and made a decision. They agreed to drop the fight. They stipulated that the previous nationwide order blocking the rule would remain in full effect. They essentially said the rule is dead, we're not going to defend it anymore, let's move on. Now here's where things get really interesting and frankly a little concerning. After this happened, several other pistol brace lawsuits across the country were settled and dismissed. The government's position was simple. The rule is gone, so there's nothing left to fight about. These cases are moot. Everyone can go home. But one case is refusing to go quietly into the night. A challenge filed by a major gun rights organization alongside the state of Texas and Attorney General Ken Paxton is pushing back against this narrative. They're arguing something that should make every pistol brace owner sit up and pay attention. The fight isn't actually over, not even close. Their argument centers on a fundamental problem with how this whole situation has been resolved. The original rule was struck down on procedural grounds. The court found that the final rule didn't properly follow from the proposed rule, which is a technical violation of administrative procedure requirements. But here's the critical point that everyone seems to be glossing over. The court never actually rejected the government's underlying interpretation of what the law says. Think about what that means for a second. The rule is gone, yes. But the ATF's position that braced pistols can be classified as short-barreled rifles under the existing statutory language of the National Firearms Act, that interpretation is still sitting there completely intact, waiting to be used again. This isn't some theoretical concern. According to recent court filings, there have been situations where enforcement actions based on this interpretation have continued even after the rule was supposedly struck down.
So we have some important news in the challenge against the ATF's pistol brace rule.
So the ATF is back at it again. You'd think after being slapped down by federal courts multiple times, they'd get the message.
The final rule on factoring criteria for stabilizing braces is no longer in effect.
Firearms Policy Coalition has succeeded in their lawsuit against the federal government.
So basically what they said was, we're not going to declare winners, we're just simply vacating this rule.
Pistol brace is illegal, or declaring that your pistol brace equipped pistol is a short-barreled rifle, that's gone.
Even after the new administration agreed that the rule was no longer enforceable, the legal theory that pistol braces transform a pistol into a regulated firearm hasn't gone anywhere. In their notice to the court, the challengers stated something that should send chills down your spine. They pointed out that without proper injunctive relief, The government is in a position to simply continue enforcement of the same restrictions by referencing the underlying statutory scheme.
So, short version here is that the DOJ has agreed to dismiss its appeal in Mock v. Bondi.
Not only are we not going to enforce these, but we are not going to provide any monies for enforcement of these.
The ATF overreach has been stopped once again.
They really don't know what to do with this one, which is always a good thing to see.
Finally closes a very arbitrary and authoritarian chapter in the government overreach book. The Department of Justice has dropped their pistol brace lawsuit.
The Trump DOJ recently stipulated to the Fifth Circuit that they have agreed to drop the active appeal on the whole pistol brace issue.
They don't need the rule anymore. They can just point to the National Firearms Act and say that braced pistols meet the definition of regulated firearms under the existing text. This is exactly why the ongoing challenge is so critically important. Instead of accepting dismissal and walking away with what looks like a win, the plaintiffs are asking for something much more significant. They want the court to issue a permanent injunction that would block the ATF from enforcing any interpretation that treats braced pistols as short-barreled rifles, whether through a formal rule or through direct application of the statutory language.
And now that decision by the DOJ to drop the mock lawsuit is impacting even more pistol brace cases.
Like that one friend who insists they can fix their car by kicking the tire, the ATF just keeps doubling down on their pistol brace nonsense.
Even before this rule, there were some vague and pretty fuzzy guidelines on braces with a lot of flip-flopping from the ATF.
You had to register these pistols that were equipped with the pistol brace and to register them as short-barreled rifles.
It was kind of Schrodinger's gun, I guess is how I'm thinking about it, because it was both a pistol and a rifle at the same time.
If you're going to restrict a constitutional right, it has to be consistent with the nation's historical traditions of firearm regulation.
If granted, this kind of relief would do something that none of the other settlements have accomplished. It would actually close the door on this issue. It would prevent any future administration from simply picking up where the previous one left off. It would create real, lasting protection for pistol brace owners instead of this temporary ceasefire that could end at any moment.
It said in part that gun regulations must be consistent with the historical tradition of firearms regulations in the U.S.
Recently, multiple pistol brace lawsuits that were launched in response to what the Biden administration did have been dropped and settled as moot.
The court has said in common use, that's off limits. Clearly, pistol braces are in common use.
First and foremost, basic gun safety does not have to be a threat to the Second Amendment.
Targeting of pistol braces has been going on since 2023, and if the ATF had their way, they would have gladly turned millions of legal gun owners into felons.
In 2012, the ATF said that attaching a brace would not alter the classification of a firearm.
The court has now agreed that this issue deserves further consideration. They've ordered additional briefing to determine whether the case is truly moot or whether there's a genuine need for permanent injunctive relief. The government will have the opportunity to file a motion to dismiss and explain why they believe everything is settled. Then the challengers will respond with their arguments for why the threat remains real and active.
Instead of dismissing the case, they asked for the court to issue a permanent injunction to block the ATF's current interpretation of the NFA.
First of all, it's important that you know the gun and concealed carry laws in your home state and anywhere you plan to carry.
One less thing gun owners have to worry about. This means you can continue to use them how you've been using them for years.
Concealment or the subjective use of a brace as a shoulder stock would change the classification from a pistol to a short barrel rifle.
This is not a gun decision.
No.
It's not. This was not decided on Second Amendment grounds.
Also, that ruling was only based on an APA procedural issue, which could be remedied by any future anti-gun administration.
Here's something else that's worth considering as we watch this unfold. By agreeing to drop all these cases and accepting settlements, gun rights advocates got an immediate practical win. The rule is gone, enforcement has stopped, people can breathe a little easier. But there's a long-term cost to this approach that not enough people are talking about. The only binding legal precedent we have on this issue comes from a single district court decision. That's the lowest level of the federal court system.
Basically, they kicked the ATF in the teeth. They seem kind of punch drunk. They seem as though they got the bell rung pretty bad.
There's a myriad of things that can tie you up legally, financially, put you in jail, or maybe get you in very serious trouble with the police.
And I think it's worth noting, hey, this wasn't invalidated on Second Amendment grounds.
The appeal from the DOJ with the pistol braces is gone, finito, withdrawn.
And it will impact everyone nationwide, and that would now be kind of the law of the land. And the ATF conceded that the pistol brace rule is now vacated.
In 2014, said that the ATF doesn't classify weapons based on how someone uses them.
If a future administration decides to take another crack at regulating pistol braces, they only have to overcome one district court ruling that was based entirely on procedural grounds. There's no appellate court decision establishing that the government's interpretation is wrong. There's no higher court ruling that pistol braces are protected or that the ATF lacks authority to regulate them this way. A procedural victory can be fixed.
This rule reclassified large format handguns equipped with pistol stabilizing braces as short-barreled rifles.
But when used as a stock with certain firearms with barrels less than 16 inches, then you have an NFA item.
That rule just said having a pistol with an arm brace is definitionally an SBR.
Firearms Policy Coalition and the Department of Justice have come to an agreement where the Department of Justice will drop its appeal.
It does not prevent the current or future ATF from saying they can regulate pistol braces purely based on the NFA's statutory language.
There's a possibility braces might end up in the crosshairs again by a new ATF rule or through legislation.
If a future administration wants to go after pistol braces again, they just need to be more careful about how they draft their proposed rule and how they respond to public comments. They can follow all the proper administrative procedures and end up right back where we started, arguing the same underlying legal theory that was never actually rejected by any court.
The weapons unto themselves, they're not the problem. The problem is, what are you doing with the weapons?
The district court here should instead issue a permanent injunction against the ATF's current and future enforcement of any pistol brace restriction.
You need to be on the right side of the law because the legal system is complex.
ATF is getting another lawsuit, this time by half of the country.
So I think it comes down to the definition of what a rifle is.
Half a dozen lawsuits were filed, and now, finally, here we are.
Now that the DOJ is no longer pursuing enforcement action, the proposed pistol brace rule is now gone.
The next few weeks are going to be incredibly revealing. We're about to find out what the current administration actually believes about pistol braces and how they intend to treat this issue going forward. Their response to this case will tell us whether they genuinely believe brace pistols are legal and protected, or whether they're simply choosing not to enforce restrictions right now while keeping their options open. If they argue aggressively for dismissal and refuse to accept a permanent injunction, that should raise serious red flags. It would suggest they want to preserve their ability to change course later, or that they're leaving the door open for future administrations to pick up this fight again.
The rule was vacated on procedural grounds. Failure to constitute a logical outgrowth of a proposed rule
is a massive deal. It directly goes after the ATF's tactics over the last 2 years.
With gun control being implemented in a number of states, even where least expected, this is not a bill that gun owners should ignore.
Not every instrument that is bearable will be protected by the Second Amendment.
GOA in Texas are pointing out is that the ATF may still be trying to do something sneaky with the whole pistol brace issue.
The ATF response didn't just say braces make a gun an SBR. They went further.
On the other hand, if they agree that a permanent injunction is appropriate, that would be a genuine victory. It would demonstrate a real commitment to protecting pistol brace owners and closing this chapter once and for all. This situation perfectly illustrates why the details matter so much in these legal battles. Headlines declaring victory can mask underlying vulnerabilities that leave gun owners exposed to future attacks. A settlement that looks like a win today can turn into a devastating loss tomorrow if the fundamental legal questions are never actually resolved.
The ATF has agreed to drop some of these lawsuits, and they agreed to not enforce the Biden administration's pistol brace rule.
We are unlikely to get a nationwide injunction. The current injunction is still in effect, and the vacatur is still in effect.
Not having this Fourth Amendment to protect you and protect yourself from the police just entering your home without a warrant, that's pretty crazy.
ATF and the government is going to fight this every step of the way. And sooner or later, it will land before the Supreme Court.
But they may still intend to enforce the restrictions on brace pistols just purely on the subjective interpretation.
Right now, millions of Americans own braced pistols. They've been told the threat is over. They've been told they can relax. But the reality is that their rights are hanging by a thread, protected only by the current administration's decision not to enforce an interpretation that remains legally viable. One case stands between that precarious situation and genuine, lasting protection. One group of plaintiffs is refusing to accept a hollow victory and is fighting for something that actually matters. The outcome of this challenge could determine the future of pistol braces in America for generations to come. As this case develops and new information becomes available, the implications will become clearer. Whether the courts agree that permanent protection is necessary or whether they decide the current situation is sufficient remains to be seen. But one thing is certain, this fight is far from over no matter what the headlines might say. That's it for today, folks. See you in the next video.